Baseball. For so many of us, it's more than just a game. It's the smell of fresh-cut grass, the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd. It's a timeless thread woven through the fabric of generations, filled with moments of triumph, heroism, and pure joy. But like any story that spans over a century, the history of America's pastime isn't always bathed in the warm glow of stadium lights. There are shadows on the diamond, moments so dark they threaten to eclipse the very soul of the sport. These are the stories that are often whispered, the ones that remind us that even our heroes can fall, and that the game we love is fragile. We're going to journey back in time, not to celebrate the home runs or the perfect games, but to explore the moments that left a permanent scar. These aren't just scandals or tragedies, they are the darkest chapters the sport has ever seen. They are the moments that forced baseball to confront its own mortality, its own imperfections, and its own capacity for heartbreak. From betrayal on the grandest stage to the ultimate sacrifice, these events shook the foundations of the game and forever changed its course. So, join me as we step into the dugout of history and uncover the stories that test our faith in the game. We'll look at the human cost behind the headlines, the shattered legacies, and the profound impact these moments had on the players, the fans, and the sport itself. This is a look at 5 of the darkest moments in baseball history. A reminder that behind the glory, there can be profound darkness. The year is 1919. The Great War is over and America is looking for heroes, for something pure to believe in. They find it in the Chicago White Sox, a powerhouse team, dominant and seemingly destined for glory. They were set to face the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series, the pinnacle of the sport. But beneath the surface of this celebrated team, a dark conspiracy was brewing. A group of 8 players, including the legendary shoeless Joe Jackson, made a pact with gamblers. A deal with the devil, you could say. They agreed to intentionally lose the World Series in exchange for money. Imagine the weight of that decision. To stand on the biggest stage in your profession, with the eyes of the world upon you, and to deliberately fail. Every missed catch, every weak swing, every pitch thrown with less than full effort was a dagger in the heart of the fans who adored them. The players involved weren't all villains in a simple sense. Some were driven by greed, others by a deep-seated resentment towards the team's notoriously cheap owner, Charles Comiskey. They felt underpaid and disrespected, and in their minds, this was a way to get what they felt they deserved. But their personal grievances led to a public betrayal of an entire nation's trust. The conspiracy unraveled, and the scandal exploded across the headlines. "Say it ain't so, Joe," a young fan supposedly cried out to shoeless Joe Jackson, a plea that has echoed through history. That simple phrase captures the heartbreak, the sheer disbelief that heroes could fall so far. The players were acquitted in a court of law, but the damage was done. Baseball's newly appointed commissioner, Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, brought down a verdict that would be absolute. He banned all 8 men from the sport for life, a punishment that cemented their infamy and served as a stark warning. The Black Sox scandal wasn't just about a fixed series, it was about the loss of innocence. It was the moment America realized that its national pastime, this thing they held up as pure and true, could be corrupted from within. The game survived, but it was forever changed. A shadow of doubt had been cast over the diamond, and the trust between the fans and the players would take decades to rebuild. It was the first, and perhaps most profound scar on the soul of baseball. Let's travel to the Polo Grounds in New York, August 16, 1920. It's a tense game between the Cleveland Indians and the New York Yankees. At the plate for the Indians is Ray Chapman, one of the most popular players in the league. He was a beloved shortstop, known for his energy, his speed, and his infectious personality. He was just 29 years old, recently married, with his whole life and a brilliant career ahead of him. On the mound for the Yankees was Carl Mays, a pitcher known for his intimidating submarine-style delivery and a temperament that matched. In the dim light of the late afternoon, Mays wound up and unleashed a fastball. Chapman, who had a habit of crowding the plate, never moved. The ball, scuffed and darkened from use, a common practice in that era, was nearly invisible against the twilight sky. The sound that followed was sickening, a sharp crack that echoed across the stadium. At first, everyone thought the ball had hit the bat. But then, Chapman collapsed. The pitch had struck him in the temple with brutal force. He tried to get up, even took a few steps towards first base before his legs gave out for good. He was rushed to the hospital, but the damage was catastrophic. The impact had fractured his skull, and despite emergency surgery, Ray Chapman passed away in the early hours of the next morning. The news sent a shockwave of grief and horror through the entire country. He remains to this day the only player in Major League Baseball history to be killed by a pitch during a game. The sport was forced to confront a brutal reality. The game they played could be lethal. It was a tragic, freak accident, but one born from the dangerous conditions of the era. In the wake of Chapman's death, baseball changed forever. The immediate and most lasting impact was the banning of the spitball and other pitches that involved doctoring the baseball. More importantly, umpires were now required to replace any ball that became discolored or scuffed. The game became brighter, safer. Batting helmets, though not mandatory for decades, had their conceptual origins in this tragedy. Ray Chapman's death was not in vain. His sacrifice, as devastating as it was, led to crucial safety reforms that have undoubtedly saved countless other players from a similar fate. Fast forward to the late 1990s and early 2000s. Baseball was in a golden age of power. Home runs were flying out of ballparks at a record-breaking pace. Fans were captivated by epic home run chases, watching titans like Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, and later, Barry Bonds, rewrite the history books. The game was more popular than ever, seemingly recovered from past labor disputes. But this golden age had a dark secret, an open secret that many chose to ignore. The game wasn't just being played on the field, it was being played in the pharmacy. This was the steroid era. An alarming number of players, from superstars to journeymen, were using anabolic steroids and other performance-enhancing drugs, or PEDs. These substances allowed them to become bigger, stronger, and faster than ever before. They could recover from injuries quicker and sustain a higher level of performance over the grueling 162-game season. The result was an offensive explosion that, at the time, felt like magic. But it was a chemical illusion, a fraud perpetrated on a massive scale. The whispers eventually grew into a roar that could no longer be ignored. The Balco scandal broke, implicating some of the sport's biggest names, including the all-time home run king, Barry Bonds. Congressional hearings followed, where players like Mark McGwire infamously refused to talk about the past. The curtain was pulled back, revealing a culture of cheating that had permeated the league. The trust between fans and players was shattered once again. Every incredible home run, every record-breaking season from that era was now viewed through a lens of suspicion. The legacy of the steroid era is one of complexity and deep-seated damage. It tainted an entire generation of statistics, making it impossible to compare players across different eras. It kept legendary players, their numbers undeniably inflated by PEDs, out of the Hall of Fame, sparking endless debate. Baseball was forced to implement one of the strictest drug testing programs in professional sports, a necessary but somber admission of its past failures. The home runs were thrilling, but the cost was the very integrity of the record books. Pete Rose was baseball royalty. Nicknamed Charlie Hustle, he was the embodiment of grit and determination. He played the game with a reckless abandon and a burning desire to win that was unmatched, and his efforts paid off. Over a remarkable 24-year career, he became baseball's all-time hits leader, collecting 4,256 hits, a record that many believe will never be broken. He was a living legend, a first-ballot Hall of Famer in waiting. But Pete Rose had a secret, a compulsion that would lead to his permanent downfall. The rumors began to swirl in 1989, shortly after his playing career ended, and while he was managing the Cincinnati Reds, the team he was most synonymous with. An investigation was launched, and the findings were damning. The Dowd Report, a comprehensive 225-page document, laid out overwhelming evidence that Pete Rose had bet on baseball games, including on his own team. For baseball, this was the ultimate sin. The shadow of the 1919 Black Sox scandal loomed large, and the league had a zero-tolerance policy, Rule 21D, posted in every clubhouse. Any player, umpire, or official who bets on a game they are involved in shall be permanently ineligible. Rose initially denied everything, fighting the accusations with the same tenacity he showed on the field. But the evidence was insurmountable. To avoid a formal hearing and a ruling from the commissioner, Rose agreed to a voluntary placement on baseball's permanently ineligible list. It was a lifetime ban. The man with more hits than anyone in history was cast out of the game he defined. For years he maintained his innocence, but in his 2004 autobiography, he finally came clean, admitting he had bet on the Reds to win while he was their manager. The debate over Pete Rose's legacy rages to this day. Should the all-time hits leader be in the Hall of Fame? His supporters argue that his on-field accomplishments are separate from his off-field transgressions. But for the guardians of the game, the line he crossed was absolute. Betting on the game compromises its integrity in a way nothing else can. The story of Pete Rose is a modern baseball tragedy, a cautionary tale of how even the greatest of heroes can be brought down by their own fatal flaws, forever exiled from the kingdom they once ruled. Some stories are dark not because of scandal or betrayal, but because of the immense light that was prematurely extinguished. This is the story of Roberto Clemente. He wasn't just a baseball player, he was a pioneer, a humanitarian, and an icon. The Pittsburgh Pirates right fielder was a sublime talent, a 15-time All-Star, a 2-time World Series champion, and the first Latin American player to be enshrined in the Hall of Fame. He played with a unique grace and fire, and off the field he carried himself with an even greater sense of dignity and purpose. Clemente was fiercely proud of his Puerto Rican heritage and was a relentless advocate for social justice and equality. He spent his off-seasons dedicated to charity work, using his fame and fortune to help those in need, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean. In December of 1972, a massive earthquake devastated Managua, the capital of Nicaragua. Clemente immediately sprang into action, organizing emergency relief flights to deliver food, water, and medical supplies to the victims. After learning that some of the earlier shipments had been diverted by corrupt officials, Clemente made a fateful decision. He decided he would personally accompany the next flight on New Year's Eve, 1972, believing his presence would ensure the aid reached the people who desperately needed it. He boarded a small, overloaded DC-7 cargo plane, a craft with a history of mechanical problems. Shortly after takeoff from the coast of Puerto Rico, the plane's engines failed, and it crashed into the icy waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Roberto Clemente's body was never recovered. The news of his death sent a wave of profound sadness across the world. He was just 38 years old, and had recorded his 3,000th career hit on the final day of the previous season. He died as he lived, in the service of others. This was not a scandal but a tragedy of the highest order. A hero was lost not to a flaw, but to his own incredible compassion. In his honor, Major League Baseball waived the traditional 5-year waiting period, inducting him into the Hall of Fame the following year. The league also renamed its annual Commissioner's Award, given to the player who best exemplifies sportsmanship and community service, the Roberto Clemente Award, a fitting tribute to a man whose greatness extended far beyond the foul lines. The Black Sox scandal, the tragic death of Ray Chapman, the chemical stain of the steroid era, the banishment of Pete Rose, the heroic, heartbreaking loss of Roberto Clemente. These moments, each in their own way, shook baseball to its core. They exposed the game's vulnerabilities to greed, to human error, to tragedy, and to the flaws of its greatest heroes. They are the scars on the timeline of our national pastime, permanent reminders that the story of baseball is a human story, filled with both incredible triumph and profound sorrow. But these dark chapters also reveal something else about the sport, its resilience. From each crisis, baseball was forced to evolve. The Black Sox scandal led to the creation of the Commissioner's Office to protect the game's integrity. Chapman's death brought about vital safety rules. The steroid era resulted in strict drug testing. The controversies surrounding Rose and Clemente in vastly different ways reinforced the values the game holds dear, integrity on one hand and humanitarianism on the other. These moments, as dark as they were, ultimately forged a stronger, safer, and more self-aware sport. And that is the enduring power of baseball. It survives, it learns, it continues. The game is bigger than any one player, any one scandal, or any one tragedy. It lives on in the hearts of the fans, in the dreams of young players, and in the timeless beauty of a perfect pitch or a towering home run. Even after its darkest days, the sun rises again, the stadium lights flicker on, and the umpire yells, "Play ball!" Because in the end, the game endures, carrying its history, its shadows, and its light forward into the next generation.